There is no other advice other than you just have to do it anyway. Like, there's no way around it. There's no hack. There's no like, well, can you think about it this? It's cringe. Still do it.
Welcome to Mad Influence, a podcast about the power of influence and what happens when people choose to use it for good. I'm Helen Saul, and after a decade in marketing, I've seen how influence can be used for good, bad, and everything in between. In this series, I meet founders, campaigners, and creatives who are choosing to use their platforms to make a meaningful impact, to understand how ideas spread, create connection, and drive change. Today's guest is Claudia Cardinali, Strategy Director at Great Influence, where she runs personal brands for founders, entrepreneurs, and some of the UK's most recognised CEOs and leadership teams. Claudia is also a LinkedIn top voice and speaker. She first built her audience by openly talking about topics like navigating a quarter-life crisis, and today she discusses everything from personal branding strategy to creator-led thinking and employee advocacy. Her career has grown rapidly, from freelance copywriter to director level, and today she's looked up to by tens of thousands of people for practical, experience-led advice. In her own words, if I was just starting my career now, I would not be making a CV. I would be thinking about how I create content on a platform. Well, thank you so much for joining today, Claudia.
Thank you so much. What an absolutely lovely intro.
Well, lovely intro because it's about all of your achievements. So.
Yeah, it helps.
Great way to set us off. I thought maybe we could begin by talking a little bit about what it is Great Influence does, and maybe when you describe that, you could possibly cover any misconceptions that people might have about it, because it's relatively a newish industry, and therefore I think people sometimes make assumptions that might not always be right.
Yeah, for sure. So we're technically a personal branding agency. We did have a period where we were like, should we even use the term personal brand? But we decided it makes sense in the end. So essentially we work mainly with founders, sometimes CEOs, leadership teams, to build their online profiles. And I guess like a nitty-gritty of what that looks like on a day-to-day is kind of categorized in two things. One is strategy. Obviously, a lot of my thinking goes towards that. And the second is kind of execution within content on different platforms. The strategy really is about understanding what they want their business to achieve. And I think that's maybe where personal branding gets a little bit muddied, because I feel like the intention behind it is different for different people. And I think sometimes people see it as like a bit of a means to an end about getting their name out there or just like raising their profile for profile's sake. All of the work we do is really rooted in business. And how do we drive a business forward, and how do we use the founder's profile to do that? So yeah, that's probably the main part. And then my role within that really as strategy director is to really understand the founder and their business. And that sounds really broad, but there's lots of different ways that we do that. It's mostly rooted in asking a lot of questions. I feel like an actual interviewer / researcher sometimes when we go into our new client onboarding sessions, because basically I just have to get into the nitty gritty. That's my job, is to find out as much information as possible and translate it in a way that is valuable to them and their business.
I think that is really interesting, and I think sometimes it can be helpful to have an example. And I'm thinking about myself and my own perspective of this, and I would probably describe myself as someone that has maybe a mini personal brand. I've sort of dabbled in it a little bit. I've seen the effects of having built a small following on LinkedIn in terms of whether that is, getting invited to events, previously having some job offers off the back of LinkedIn, and opportunities that have come up. I would say that I'm probably not that strategic in what I do, and you're definitely coming from the perspective of supporting a lot of founders. I've founded this podcast. If you had to be really brutal with me, what's the opportunity I'm losing out on by the fact that I am, yes, I've built a little following. I think I have 5,000 followers now, but I am not doing it with any actual real strategy behind it.
I think it's like the energy versus ROI conundrum of, I'm putting a lot of energy into this thing because it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of brain space to create content that's actually good on any platform. Isn't usually just like a flippant thing. You might get a one-off post that goes a bit viral, but to do that consistently takes thinking, it takes effort, it takes time. I actually think there sometimes is value in having no strategy at the beginning. And there's huge value in having an experimentation mindset, because actually over strategizing at the start can be a bit of a false start in terms of, right, okay, I need to get the content pillars, and I need to get the audience, and I need to get the platform, and I need to do an editor analysis and all the rest of it. You're actually just delaying the thing that you actually need to do, which is push post. In the beginning, the most important thing that you can do is show up repeatedly in a way that is consistent. I feel like you're then ready to turn it up a gear and then start thinking about a strategy maybe. And it might sound like counterintuitive advice from a strategy director to not have a strategy in the beginning. But I think a lot of what we do is data-led and evidence-led, and you actually don't know what your audience want from you unless you start to give them pieces of information, and then they can kind of direct your thinking, and they'll be the ones that are asking questions, and they'll be the ones that are kind of like digging for information. So actually doing kind of like a throwing stuff at the wall tactic at the beginning is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually what you do once you've got that data that's really important. So the thing that I'd be thinking about is if you've been kind of throwing stuff around for a while, it's okay, who is engaging? Are they valuable to me? And I think that there's two different audiences that can be valuable. One is like, let's say in your case, people that listen to the podcast. So that's like a one-on-one ratio, I guess, convincing people one-on-one to listen to the podcast. The other unlock, especially for founders, is like, okay, if you're not speaking directly to consumers, who is a valuable audience for your business? For me, that's like investors, partners, sponsors, retailers in some cases. So it's like you've actually switched the audience from consumers, which is one-on-one, to investors, which is one on infinite amount, depending on the value that they could add to your business. So I think it's that mindset shift of, okay, who am I trying to convince? And especially for people that have brand accounts. And so let's say any given brand has a founder account, a brand account, the team accounts, as all different mechanisms to reach different audiences. If the founder is duplicating the same things as the brand account, what's the value? Because you've already got the brand account that's trying to reach consumers and get people to buy the products and share the product features, etc. What's the value in the founder doing exactly the same thing? And I think that there's kind of sometimes a failure to recognize that the founder can play a very different role to the brand accounts can, and show up in a different way and reach people in a new way. And actually, are they trying to reach the same people, or are they trying to reach a different audience? So to answer your question, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of show up as a founder. I think it really depends on the stage of business that you're at.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And as someone that's had a career in-house marketing for brands, there's a lot of similarities in terms of we look at our different marketing channels and they might all serve a different purpose and potentially also be used to reach different audiences as well. I think when you were explaining it, you obviously now speak from a place of expertise of having done this for many years. And I wondered if I took you back to the beginning of when you sort of first started out, how that was for you then. I'm imagining you were in quite a different place to where you now sit.
100%. I think like as much as it depends on the phase of a founder and where they are in their business journey, if you're not a founder and you're just wanting to show up and build your personal brand, again, I think it depends what phase of your career you're at. So when I first started posting content on LinkedIn, I was working for a different company. There was two of us. The purpose of LinkedIn was to build a connection with students, which is the kind of industry that I was in at the time. And the job that I had was, how do I get students to pay attention to what I'm saying? So at that time, 5 years ago, I'd not long out of uni. The value that I had was, I can relate to your experience as a student because I've been to university, I've experienced the same things as you. That's kind of why I attached myself to Quarter Life Crisis, which was like the first thing that I started posting about when I was posting on LinkedIn. You'd have to literally hold a gun to my head to get that information out of me now. Like, there's no way that I would admit to having a meltdown in that sense. But at that time, it was a relatability piece. And I think it was really valuable for students to see someone going through the same experiences that they had. So that's why I started talking about Quarter Life Crisis. And it just took off. I think LinkedIn was a very different platform then than it is now. And it was something that I really enjoyed. And the reason that I chose LinkedIn as opposed to kind of Instagram, TikTok wasn't really around then in the same way that it is now, was because I didn't feel confident on video. And I felt like I could be a bit of a keyboard warrior and tap out a post and put it on LinkedIn. And it was a platform that felt comfortable to me. And I've definitely kind of built my confidence up over the years to be able to do things like this and speak on stages and all the rest of it. But at that time, it was what feels comfortable, what feels valuable for the business, and how can I show up in a way that feels genuine to me. And I think actually translate that to today, that's the sweet spot that I would still recommend to people, is like to build it as a sustainable part of your lifestyle and your career. It has to be valuable to the business. It has to be something that feels comfortable for you, and it has to kind of be something that you can constantly keep showing up at. So those are, unbeknownst to me at the time, the kind of subconscious decisions that I made to start showing up on LinkedIn in a way that was valuable and still impactful for the business. Kind of what happened from there was Ash, who was actually the founder of Great Influence, the company that I work for, saw what I was doing and just dropped me a message to say, seen you posting, have you ever thought about creating content for other people on LinkedIn? I was like, no, because I didn't know that was a job. So yeah, that's kind of where that conversation came from 5 years ago now.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So a lot's happened in those 5 years. I thought it was really interesting hearing you talk about how when you first started out, you felt like a place you needed to be was relatability. You felt like you needed to be open, maybe a bit vulnerable, talking about concepts like, having a bit of a meltdown, quarter life crisis, and how you wouldn't necessarily talk about that kind of thing now. I've certainly noticed a transition myself on that topic of how people present content, and definitely someone who works in the marketing industry for a long time, there was a buzzword which I began to hate, which is authenticity. Not that I hate anything about being authentic.
Yeah.
I'm all for it, but people seem to use it to just describe anything and everything, and it was all anyone would talk about. And it almost got to a peak where it felt like some influencers and content creators were being accused of almost faking this authenticity. So I wondered if you've got any thoughts on how you balance both the pressure to be relatable and therefore make people engage with your content, and then also the pressure to run a business and think strategically and who do you want to target, and how do all these things mesh together?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I think the frustration that I have with authenticity is that it's just a replacement for other words. What people really mean when they say, are you being authentic, is, are you being real or are you being fake? That's it. And I think that we've kind of made it a bit of an easier thing to digest by using the word authenticity as opposed to like, are you being fake? So I think that like clarifying it for what it is really helpful in one sense. But I also think that social media in its essence is slightly performative in every way. Even the parts where you're trying to be relatable, you're trying to be relatable. I actually think that's fine. I think it's okay. And I think if we accept that for what it is, that social media is performative in its mere existence, it takes the pressure off a bit for everyone to show up in a way that's honest and relatable and real, and like, oh, you would never say that in real life, you're only saying it for social media or the rest of it. I think there's elements of people that have very clear intentions that aren't necessarily honest. And I think there's people that maybe just get it wrong sometimes, like we all do, and they put their foot in it a bit. And I think it's dangerous to brandish people inauthentic if they make a mistake, because we all have slip ups. We all say things we might not mean. I also think it's unrealistic to hold the expectations so high of everyone. They have to be completely transparent in every single piece of communication they have with the real world. And I think that there's so much pressure attached to social media because on one hand, I see the argument of if you're choosing to consistently put yourself out there has to be an element of accountability and respect and trust and all the rest of it. But then on the other hand, I think everyone's also still a human, and if it's their job, they're not going to be 100% perfect at it all the time. So I think it's just like you have to have the nuance with it, and you have to be, as a person, able to make a decision of whether, okay, I don't think that person's authentic. I'm just going to unfollow them and I'm not going to see their content anymore and I'm going to leave it there.
Yeah, I kind of wonder as well if it feels like we level this criticism much more online than we do, say, offline. We accuse people of being inauthentic, performative online, but also the personas that people have offline, sometimes they might not exactly be 100% themselves at work or at a work event or in an interview, for example, but it feels like we don't level that same criticism there.
Yeah, massively. I always think of like even LinkedIn as a platform. I always think of LinkedIn as like a job interview. Like, would I say something here that I wouldn't say in a room with a future potential employer or a future hire or whatever it is? No. So the version of me that shows up on LinkedIn is different to the version of me that shows up on Instagram, to TikTok, etc. That's not me being inauthentic. It's just me kind of shifting to the environment that I'm in. Again, to your point there, something that we do in real life. And I think it's just like affording the people around us a bit of grace. And I think especially when it comes to, I guess the conversation that comes with it is like brands want to work with people that are authentic and genuine and real and all the rest of it. I think most people are trying to be that. And I actually think that we can give people a bit of leeway sometimes in like, well, you made a mistake. Doesn't mean you're inauthentic. Doesn't mean that we should kind of eradicate your entire personality from the face of the world. Just means you slipped up, we'll call it quits there and we'll move on to the next thing. I think that actually we're having the wrong conversation sometimes of like, how do we be authentic? Well, maybe we should probably be asking like what authenticity actually is.
Yeah, definitely.
Are you going to ask me what authenticity is off the back of that?
No. I think authenticity really, like you said, it's about just being real. What I was actually going to ask you is a bit about when you were talking about how we're not giving people grace and we're not sort of allowing people to slip up. I wondered if this is coming from an experience working with clients and stuff and seeing people, for example, in their comments kind of being really forward in the criticisms. It's certainly something I've noticed and I've written about in the past. Just the example of working in the marketing industry. The content, unfortunately, that performs the best is that which criticizes others, right? And some of the opinions that I see and the outrage over things that actually I'm not always convinced people actually retain this outrage in real life. I often think about the poor person that was maybe like a junior exec working on this campaign that is kind of seeing all these thought leaders destroy what they did. And I wondered, is that something you've had to tackle either for yourself, your clients?
It like being really transparent, like not massively. Like we have a very firm and fast kind of don't burn the bridge rule. Like we would never attack anyone. We would never tear someone down in terms of like the conversations that we have with clients. And that's really important to me personally and professionally. And I think that it does happen from time to time, but it's always from a place of accountability. And I think that if you're willing to meet someone in a conversation, actually they pry a little bit and, or maybe they've misinterpreted, or maybe they've read it wrong, or maybe they've had an experience that makes them react in such a way that's a bit more fiery than everyone else. And if you meet them with explanation and care and consideration, most of the time they actually go, you know what, I see your point of view. You'll get the occasional anomaly of person that is just out for a fight. And I just think lost cause, let them live their life how they want. So I think it's just offering people consideration and care and the time of day to help them come around. And as the saying goes, like, if you meet fire with fire, you're just going to get burned. And I really do believe that. And I think I can imagine it's very different for people that are experiencing this at scale. Like we see it in a very like microcosm version of it. But if you're experiencing like criticism at scale or people like personally attacking you at scale, I think it's very different. In that sense. But then a lot of what we deal with is very much business related as opposed to kind of personal opinions. It's very knowledge related. It's business values, goals driven. So it's less kind of like the personal affrontation that you might have for an influencer or someone who's doing something slightly different.
Yeah, and probably also a bit different, say, to a brand following. Like my day job, I work for a charity, and we do get a lot of comments of people disagreeing with us, etc. And we sort of just have to bucket them into people that we can engage with, how you've described, and maybe educate, and people that are never going to want to be educated, and that's fine. We can just put them in a separate bucket. So sometimes it's just about understanding in the audience who the differences are. I think I saw or heard you talk about, when we're talking about people that are commenting on your posts, also there's been a bit of a rise in AI comments and people that aren't real, and how you deal with that, and if you had any thoughts in that area.
I think things like that are really hard because I know it's an AI comment, you know it's an AI comment, but you can't outright say you're a bot because there's like this, are you, aren't you? There's no proof, there's no evidence. So it's just this feeling of like outsourcing something that should be really personal that's actually just an AI generated thing that has no meaning behind it. And I think that, again, like content has been my livelihood for the last 5 years. And I find it really difficult to see now that like, one of the best parts of it, maybe one of the worst as well in the same breath, but it is like you get this outpouring of love and attention and people agreeing with you, sometimes disagreeing with you. And that's always been one of my favorite parts of it, is that you actually get this micro focus group of people that will tell you what they really think. and often people that you don't know. And I think how crazy is that this group of people who I've never met are just showing up in the comments of something that I've said. I think it's a real shame that now people are outsourcing that as a way, again, to kind of hack the system. And I think that that's where I, on one hand, think that AI and the way that it's going to elevate and change social media, it can be a positive thing. On the other hand of it, I think there's shreds of connection and reality left in social media as it is, and that's just going to decimate the rest of it. I look at the comments on my posts sometimes and I think 50% of these are bots, and I'm going to reply to them anyway, because what if they're not? And what if it's one person that actually is going to hear from me and want to listen to what I have to say and listen to a podcast in a couple of months' time? So it's like, at the moment, you can't differentiate between the two. So I'm just betting on that they're a real person. There might come a time when that is not the case, but for now.
Yeah. Do you think there's potentially, I don't know if this is me just being overly optimistic, but a counter positive, which is that, a lot of people talking about like AI slop and the sea of everything being the same. Does that therefore mean for people who are being real and actually genuinely putting our human experiences into it, that stuff is going to rise above? Because certainly when I look in my feed, I feel like straight away I can just I'm pretty good now at scanning and immediately seeing, okay, this is a person and this one's not.
Yeah, I think 100%. I don't know if you follow Daniel Priestley. He's like a very expert person on brand. And he has spoken about AI and the kind of like backlash that's going to happen from AI content. And I think to a certain extent, he speaks around it being kind of like a time limit. Having a personal brand has suddenly got urgent because in a few years' time, could be a few months' time, you're not going to be able to differentiate between a video of an AI bot and a video of a person. So while the opportunity is still there for people to know that it's you, make the most of it. And to an extent, I do agree with that I do think that AI is going to change content as we know it. It's going to change social media as we know it. And I'm already seeing there's a shift away from social, or there's a shift away from kind of it being the thing that you hang every shred of your life on. And people are looking for community and they're looking for real experience and people and events. That's how I see things shifting. For the weird middle period where AI exists, but we can't really differentiate between the two, I definitely think you're absolutely right, and that there's this pocket of opportunity now where if you're strategic, if you show up consistently, if you do it in a way that is genuine and authentic and real, then you have this sweet spot of like potential that could amount to something really valuable. And I think especially in terms of people's careers, I would really be capitalizing on that now. I think that having a personal brand won't have the same impact in 10 years' time that it might today. I think for the next 2 years, it could be the thing that changes your career above all else. And that's kind of how I think about it. For my own career, for the clients we work with, is like, now is the time.
Yeah, and when you talk about how it can change your career, I think you've got people that sort of already understand the importance of that. And then there's definitely a lot of people that don't. So what would you say to someone who maybe hasn't invested in a personal brand, but you feel like by investing in a personal brand, they could really further their career? What would be your initial conversation with them?
I think again, it requires a lot of personal work and self-reflection to actually build a personal brand that's valuable. And I think a lot of people, their first point of thinking about it is, what am I going to post on LinkedIn? There's actually a bit of a rewind to be done there of like, okay, in terms of my job role that I have at the place I work currently, whether you're a freelancer, in-house, a corporate company of 10 people, what are my KPIs literally? What are the things that I need to move the needle on in the next 6 to 12 months? Start there, start where you can make the most impact, and then start to think about how you show up and become visible to the right people. So actually building a personal brand could literally just be to convince your manager that you're invested in the company. That's it. They see you on LinkedIn every other day and they think, God, she's really invested. She's doing such a great job. Job done. If that's your only KPI to make yourself look good to your manager, personal brand is a tool to do that. Amazing. And then I think that there's different levels, again, depending on the different stages of your career that you're at. If I take myself as an example now versus where I first started a great influence, it was like, I'm just going to prove that I can create content that does well on LinkedIn. That was it. That was the only thing that I had to do. And that was the only thing that I was trying to do at the same time. Now that is very different. Like my role has shifted dramatically to become responsible for new business, responsible for hiring, responsible for interviewing people, the team, commercial parts of the business, managing clients, all the rest of it. So the thing that I need people to get from me is very different to just being good at content. I need people to trust me. I need people to think that I'm an expert. I need to actually drive conversations with potential great influence clients and hires. So the tool that I have, the tool that I need to create for myself through my personal brand is very different. And I think it shifts what you talk about. That's what I was saying before about like the things that I was speaking about in Course Life Crisis days. I would not talk about now because I need all of the clients that we work with at Great Influence to think that I know what I'm doing and that I know what I'm talking about. I'm not having a mental breakdown. So it's like being in tune to your surroundings and knowing what people need from you in that moment and the impact that it can have on the business as well.
Yeah. Well, what are some of those tangible impacts that building a personal brand can have in real terms?
In terms of like actual outcomes?
Yeah.
For me and Great Influence, like I mentioned about my role, part of my role being hiring, in the first three and a half years of Great Influence, every person that sat in an interview with Great Influence referenced mine or Ash's content as part of the reason that they were reaching out or wanted to come and work for us, etc. So it's like you're creating a positive affinity with potential hires, which for us on a small scale was significant. You can imagine if that's a business of 10,000 people, the impact that could have if you've got most of your leadership team consistently showing up on LinkedIn. And especially now the way that the world is going, teams are getting smaller, teams are getting more efficient. The way to win in hiring, in my humble opinion, is be visible to the right people, because more and more people are thinking less of I want to work for this company and more of I want to work for you as a person because you're smart, I could learn from you, I want to be around you. So I think just that in itself as like a hiring tool is significantly valuable. And then I guess on the new business side of it as well, another example of this, actually, we were speaking around LinkedIn as like a platform that is kind of associated with personal brand. I've just started posting on Instagram. Well, I started posting on it a year ago, but consistently in the last couple of weeks. I have 400 followers, right? I'm not really in the interest of trying to grow it at the minute, just create a bit of a consistent presence. In the last 3 weeks, the same amount of time that I've been a bit more intentional with it, 2 people have messaged me about having a conversation about onboarding a Great Influencer as a client. I'm not trying to grow my audience. I'm just trying to be visible to the right people. I followed a bunch of people that I have met briefly at events, podcasts, etc. They followed me back to inquiries from just maintaining a presence. And I think that that's where the value of audience outweighs the number. And I think that if you know the right people to follow and you know how to get those people in your audience, actually the job that is really hard, which is cold DMing people and thinking about how do I onboard them to Great Influence as a client, means they message me rather than I have to bang their door down. So it's like all the things that are really hard, hiring, new business, they suddenly become, rather than an outbound thing, they become inbound. And I think that's the most significant switch. It takes a while to get to that point, which is why I think most people turn it off before they start to see the value. There's definitely a bit of a lag. But if you go from 0 to 1, I think that's when you see the most kind of return on investment, is that like you've been invisible to all these people. When I first started posting 5 years ago now, every time I walked into a room with my friends or networking, not every networking thing, but some networking things, people would always be like, oh, I've seen your LinkedIn post. Looks like you're smashing it. Looks like you're doing such a good job. And it was like, all I've done is I've just started telling people what I'm doing. That's it. That's literally it. And then suddenly people have this impression that you're really successful and you're doing a great job. It's just because you're visible. I could be posting that I've been crying in the corner every day for a week and they'd still walk into and be like, oh my God, I've seen your LinkedIn content. Like, it's just that visibility that creates something in people's brains that makes them think, I've seen you, so you must be doing good.
Yeah, no, I really resonate with all of what you just said then. And certainly on the hiring point, it's something that I found as well in terms of when I've shared jobs on LinkedIn, we've seen like a massive increase compared to what we would get from the regular channels that we pay for. So I definitely think it's a tool that employers themselves can also be using more of, for sure. And also really interesting hearing you talk about that consistency and posting over time, and when you're walking into rooms and people then know you for LinkedIn. And it made me wonder, has there been a specific moment in your career today where you really started to feel a sense of, oh, I feel like I'm doing a good job here, I'm really making it, or a particular point in time?
No. I think that it's hard because apart from the like initial visibility, which for me happened a while ago now, like because I've been really consistent with it over a long period of time, I used to walk into a room full of my friends and everyone was like, oh my God, what's this new thing you're doing? Like, I didn't know about it. It looks amazing, all the rest of it. I feel like people have got used to that a bit more now. The difference for me now is when someone that we're working with engages in my content, because I feel like that's the value add that I'm looking for. Is I'm actually not trying to reach everyone and anyone. I'm trying to reach a very specific pocket of people. And the thing that I'm always looking for is, are the people that I'm working with invested in my thinking? I think it's just a way of building a bit of a closer relationship with people. You have business relationships with people. I'm really invested in all the people we work with, and I love working with them, but it's a very business kind of surface level, kind of transactional way of working, as is most businesses. But the thing that when we do have the opportunity to have a conversation, or they do have the chance to see my content, I feel like it's like they get to know me on a bit of more of a personal level. And I think that that's what I am looking for in terms of recognition and validation from my content now, is like, do I feel like I'm creating closer relationships with the people around me? And is that content leading to something that is a bit more tangible in real life? So if they engage with a post on LinkedIn or like something on Instagram, if we jump on a call, are we having a conversation about something that I've shared or that they've shared? And I think that for me, like, that's the magic. That's actually what I'm looking for. I'm not looking to build an online bubble where people only interact with me in this online LinkedIn comment space. I'm looking to create something online so that I can bring it offline, so that when I meet people, you have an opportunity to create deeper relationships and you have a conversation starter and they know something about you. And I went to an event this time last year, full of very senior leaders from very brilliant brands, and I was very nervous. I walked into that room and someone came up to me and was like, Claudia, I've seen you on LinkedIn. Immediately, I was like, okay, thank God I know someone. And actually, they know me by name. And that just completely dissipated all my fears. And that's the reason why I do it, is like to create those in-person human connections. And I think that there's huge value in having an online audience. For founders, especially, and senior leaders, there's huge value in having an online audience that then translates into the offline as well.
Yeah, I think it's really valuable what you're saying about, it's almost like you're building a positive reputation before you even go into a room, and when you arrive in that room people already know you, which must be a really amazing feeling. The other thing that is very clear to me is that you have a very clear sense of who it is you want to be engaging with, people that you want to be coming to your organization, to your content, to have conversations with you. How did you go about defining who that was, who your audience is?
To be transparent and candid, there's been big pockets where I haven't known that. And actually, when my role was shifting, so before strategy director, I was head of operations. And again, part of my role was very internal and the team and the existing clients. And I kind of shifted, like my personal brand has shifted over the years from course life crisis at the very beginning to becoming a manager. And I was like literally just sharing lessons about managing a team and showing up in the right way, what I was learning. Because actually at that time, all I wanted was the team to feel like I was invested in their progress. And a way for me to do that, short of obviously speaking to them all the time, was kind of showing up online in a way that was like, okay, my team taught me this week. Or like, I actually learned this about myself because I had this conversation and this is how it's reflected in my management. So it has definitely changed. And the way that I've always tried to do it is kind of sit back and think like what my role requires of me and who is valuable for me to kind of have conversations with on two different levels, I guess, like on a day-to-day level. Who am I speaking to every day? Clients, the team, Ash, my boss, potential new business, potential hires, maybe not so much every day, but they're kind of like my immediate vicinity. And then beyond that, who's valuable in terms of partners, who's valuable in terms of marketing, who's valuable in terms of like media and press and podcasts. So I guess there's like two levels to think of it, of like day to day, who is actually going to see what I'm sharing. I think people really underestimate, especially if you're in a bigger team, the value of everyone in your immediate surrounding office seeing everything that you post every day. And you have to be really honest with yourself of like, are you going to walk into that room feeling like, oh, I shouldn't have posted that? Or is it going to be, oh yeah, I feel really happy and like that is creating a conversation that is really valuable? I guess the micro and the macro of like immediately who do I need to speak to, and then longer term, who is accidentally going to see the content that I'm putting out. So I don't think there's like, I guess there's like a series of questions in terms of like the value add to my role, the value add to the business. But again, it's not a blanket answer. It's like very personal to the situation that you're in and the career that you want.
Yeah, I think you have a really refreshing and honest way of talking about this. It makes it feel like it could be possible for lots of people to build brands. And obviously, with an organization like yours to help them, I'm sure they would fly even more so. I was wondering, what do you think of the typical types of barriers that put people off doing this initially?
I think cringe is the biggest one, like absolutely hands down. And the thing, like people ask me about this sometimes, like, isn't it, do you find it cringy? Like it's a confidence thing. And I just think, yeah, it is. Like, yes, it is. It feels like you're venturing into the unknown. It feels like you're putting yourself out there. It can feel very performative at the beginning, especially if you're trying to speak to a camera and think, what the hell am I doing? Which I think often, by the way. And I think there is no other advice other than you just have to do it anyway. Like, there's no way around it. There's no hack. There's no like, well, if you think about it, it's cringe. Still do it. That's the advice that I would give, because it's like a bit of a venture into the unknown. The only thing that I would say that's possibly helpful is that the more that you do it, the less cringe it gets. So, for example, I find it really hard if I take, which I have done before, like a month off posting or a few weeks off posting. I literally sit there and think, oh my God, everyone's going to be thinking about like, what my comeback arc is and what this post is going to be. They're not thinking about that. I'm thinking about that way too much. And I just think the only way to get over it is to do it more. And especially if I'm trying to do like Instagram, TikTok more. The amount of videos that I film that I never post anywhere is literally abhorrent. But I still do it. I still film them. I feel like I'm building the skill in some way. And it's just like, if I posted 10 videos in 24 hours, I would literally get over myself. Yeah, there's no way around. You just have to go through. I think that
Yeah.
helps.
No, it definitely does. It reminds me a lot of, I did a course called Good Shout last year, which is for women in leadership in marketing. And they talked a lot about the fact that, yeah, it is going to be a bit cringe, but you just have to power through that. And I think part of the thing that helps me as well is understanding the potential impact at the end of it.
Yeah, massively.
And maybe there is a bit of a painful thing that you have to get through, but it's worth it for what the results potentially could be. Yeah, I think that definitely has to be one of the biggest barriers. Just thinking about everything that you've done over the past 5 years, is there one thing that you are proudest of?
Oh God. I think it's the relationships that we have with clients. The thing that I love about this job is that like the reason that I kind of got into it and have stayed in it is because the people that we work with, bar none, are exceptional. Like entrepreneurs operate on a different level to the rest of the world, and I don't know how they do it. And I think that I have somehow managed to find myself in a position where I'm surrounded by people that do things differently at every opportunity that they can get. And I think that even when I was at uni and at school and figuring out what I wanted to do in the first couple of years of leaving, like I just kept getting matched with people that like didn't have the same drive. And I was like constantly had all this ambition and energy and drive to do something great. I just didn't have the thing to put it in. And I think that since being a great influence, meeting Ash, and then also meeting all of the people that we worked with, every time we go into a conversation, like they just match the energy and they teach me things and they unlock new parts of my brain. I think I'm most proud of those relationships, but also most proud of kind of like keeping up because they do operate at different levels.
Yeah.
And I try really hard to like give them the same value that they give me, because I sit in conversations sometimes. I did an interview with someone very senior at booking.com, and that was like actually probably a career highlight for me. And she was a woman and she was in a very technical role, and there was just like worlds colliding where I was like, what is happening here? And I sat in that interview and I asked her questions for an hour, and I just thought, I absolutely love that, but also at the same time, I think I did a really good job. And I think that that's because like I feel genuinely really invested in the work that we do. And also like the way that I kind of look at content and the people that we work with is like, I really feel that the information that we put out into the world through these people and through their thoughts and their thinking, and we're just like a bit of a vehicle for making sure that their voice gets heard, Like, I really feel like that positively impacts their worlds and the people around them. And I think that I feel really proud of playing a part in that, and that these amazing entrepreneurs and business owners and leaders actually have the platform that they deserve, and we've played some part in that. So, bit of a long-winded answer, but yeah,
No,
definitely that.
I think that's amazing to hear, and I can really tell your passion about working with these types of people. And I wondered, being in those kind of spaces with, you know, some of the top entrepreneurs, people that are like in really senior roles at big brands, what do you think are some of the biggest things that you've learned from them? I think you described them as just like operating in a different way. Have you got particular things that you've taken into your own life?
I think probably the biggest one is everyone's also actually still a human being. And I say that because, especially from like looking at entrepreneurs from the outside in, you think that like, God, they must be built different, like they're geared up different, their environments are different. They're literally not. They're exactly the same. And it's just like, it's just the way that they connect dots is so impressive. And they're like, diligence and like respect to their own ideas, I think, is probably the biggest one. Of like, I think that I'm right, 10 people could tell them that are wrong and they'll still go for it because they just have this gut feeling that they believe in. And I think that it's not some magic formula, it's not some like something that was in the water, it's literally just pure self-belief. And I think that it's a really rare thing because the world is kind of set up to make sure that no one really believes in themselves, and all these seeds of doubt are planted. Whereas I think entrepreneurs, the single common thread that I see between all of them is just like, yeah, unwavering self-belief. And it doesn't mean that they don't doubt themselves sometimes, because I think everyone has those feelings. And in a lot of the calls that we've had, especially because we ask people to open up to us in quite a serious way, and everyone has at some point or another has said, is anyone going to care about this? Is anyone going to care what I think? But the thing that they come back to, I think, is like, I really believe and have conviction in what I'm doing.
Yeah. What advice would you give to people about building that level of self-belief if they don't already have it? Or is it just something that you're born with?
This is a really good question. And I don't actually know if I have the answer, because I really believe in what I'm doing on a personal level. And I still have moments where I'm like, help me. I think you just have to find the thing that you believe in. And I think the thing for a lot of people is like, maybe you just haven't found the thing yet. Like, I think before I started Great Influence, I had a lot more doubt, because I was like, God, I have all these ideas and energy and ambition to do something. I just don't know what that thing is. And I think maybe if I hadn't found Great Influence, I might still be banging my head against the wall of like, what do I do? Is it the right thing? Whereas I feel very lucky that I've found the thing that I can put my energy into. So I guess the thing that I would say, if people aren't quite there yet, is try everything. Literally try everything. And if it doesn't work, one thing, like, perfect, you've crossed that thing off the list and you go again, which in itself is not an easy thing to do. But I think from experience, that's the way that I would think about it.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think you would have predicted that this is the path you would have taken?
I don't know. I'm going to be really honest, Helen. Like, when I was at uni, I actively, well, I don't know if it was actually active, like subconsciously kind of went against the grain a bit. And I saw my friends around me, very smart, intelligent, bright people. 10 of them applied for the Sky grad scheme and the Audi grad scheme. And in my head, I was just thinking, like, I would hire all of you. So what's the difference between person A and person B and person C? And I just thought, like, I don't want to feel like I'm doing the same thing as everyone else. And I just thought that if you're all great and 99% of you aren't going to get the job, then where does that, I don't know, it just, the logic wasn't logicking in my head. So I did have a few years where I was like, I don't know what I want to do. The only thing that I knew that I wasn't going to let myself not do was something great. I don't know if that's flawed logic, but I was like, whatever I do, it's going to be good. So that was the thing that was kind of like driving me. And I think that's what encouraged me to take a few more risks. Like, I've worked for a couple of startups. That average number of people that I worked with is like 6, which again is like risky when you're just out of university and all of your friends are working in London at big grad scheme and corporate companies. But I just felt like I didn't want to do that. That was the only thing that I knew, that I didn't want to do that route the same as everyone else. But beyond that, I was just throwing stuff at a wall.
It's really interesting hearing you talk about that actually in the context of, I actually did a podcast recording session earlier today with someone, and we were discussing how young people are sort of pushed into that the pinnacle of everything is the London grad scheme. You're someone that didn't take that route and has done amazing. And you just talked about specifically working in smaller companies. So what are the advantages for someone that might not know? Maybe they're at a university where they're just being told, I remember being told the thing you need to do is go get a grad scheme, but there are other options. So what would you like to tell those people about the path that it's led you to?
I think like it's really hard because society and also everyone around you, i.e. my mom was like, are you sure? Like, are you sure you don't want to do that? And it can feel like almost like a waste in a sense, because it's like your whole life has been engineered so that you go to school, you go to university, you get the grad scheme or you get the job, or you can walk into a room of people and you go, oh, I'm working at EY, oh, we all know that. Whereas if you're like working at this company that no one's ever heard of, you see people's reaction and they're like, oh, okay, ooh, how'd you get there? So I think it's like you have to be very okay with the fact that you're not going to get the immediate validation of walking into a room full of people and they go, oh my God, congratulations. I was absolutely fine with that, because the thing that I was searching for was enjoyment and fulfillment in my work. And I think that it is really hard to go against the grain. I'd say the other thing that's actually quite hard is like finding them. Maybe it's a bit easier now with LinkedIn and personal brand and posting content, but I think that initially when I was thinking about who I work for, how do you hear about a startup? Where, like, how does that exist? So I think that there's a lot to be said for networking and meeting people, and ask everyone that you know to go for a coffee, and then ask everyone that they know to go for a coffee, and just like, you have to forge your own network. I didn't have parents that could introduce me to this person and this person and this person. So I was just thinking, how do I do that myself? I was very lucky to have amazing friends that introduced me to a lot of people, and that's kind of how I went from there. So I think it's just a case of like, you have to be really determined and almost like blindly ambitious in following what you think you want. And it's kind of like not definitive as to whether you're going to get it or not. I also think, again, not sure if this is helpful, but it is a lot of luck. Like, I worked for 3 or 4 startups before Great Influence. That was 5 years of figuring it out. I could have been on the brink of being like, okay, I was actually on the brink of thinking I'll just work for a marketing agency and that'll be it. And I actually remember I got offered a job on the spot at this marketing agency as an account executive. I signed a contract and I was meant to go into the office on a Monday. Not that I recommend anyone does this, but I was like, I can't do it. I actually can't do it, because I know that if I walk into that office and I start earning a regular paycheck, that's me locked in. And I rang them up and I was like, I'm really sorry, I can't come in. And I think maybe like a month later, I got offered the job at Great Influence. So it was definitely a risk at the time. And financially, it was probably not the wisest choice I ever made early doors, but it's definitely paid off long term.
Yeah, definitely. I can see a real tie-in actually between, we were discussing earlier, self-belief, and also I think what's kind of led you to be able to do that is not relying on that external validation of like what society deems to be necessary. I think that's a really hard thing, and throughout your career you'll have, all of us have like many different choices about, do we go for the big name brand that everybody knows versus a smaller one? Do we go for the senior job title, but there might be one that sounds more junior but actually it's more interesting? And these things kind of crop up throughout our career. But I think if you have the self-belief, which is really hard, it is hard, especially when you're starting out, that is what can kind of bring you back to your values. And certainly in my own career, I've definitely found the points where I've followed what I know I enjoy. I mean, this is a good example. This podcast, I'm literally just doing it because it's something that I enjoy. And I get really great pleasure from that, and just meeting people gives me like a real sense of enjoyment. But it's about having that balance between enjoyment, ambition as well, and bringing all these things together. We're coming quite close to the end of the podcast now, so I just thought, because we've talked about influence, obviously this podcast is called Mad Influence, and similarly you work for an organization called Great Influence. So I wondered if there's been any people or things who you would say have been a big influence in your life to get to where you are today, that you would really kind of credit in who you are and the success that you have.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first and foremost, the two people that I immediately thought of there were Ash, founder of Great Influence, and Meg, who I work with every day. And I think that, again, we're a small team. There's 4 of us. And I think every day, every one of us shows up with the attitude of like, every day is a new day. We're here for a good time. We work really hard. We love the work that we do. Not every day is easy, but we always laugh every single day. And I think that they've had a huge impact on my career. And I think especially you assume when you're younger that work is going to be like this thing that is a bit gross sometimes and like not fun. And that just, especially at Great Influence, has not been my experience at all. That's not to say that it hasn't been really hard sometimes, and we've had some rough days, but we've really got each other's back. And I think that's really important in a workplace. Well, in any place really, but especially in a workplace. And then also I started listening to another brilliant podcast called People Doing Things. It's really good. It's very kind of like food and drink related. And I listened to a brilliant podcast with the founder of Depop, who's gone on to found a business called Deli, which is an online kind of cool wholesale foods marketplace. And he said something really interesting. Obviously, Depop and Deli are like very different businesses, but he made a really interesting link between like the fashion world and the food world. And he was talking about how people always used to ask what people are wearing, and now it's like what people are eating, and it's how it's shifting from fashion being the thing that people are interested in to now this weird crossover to food. And I just thought it was really interesting how we'd connected those dots. And to the point that I was talking about before about like entrepreneurs and the way that they think differently, I listened to that and I was like, you are an entrepreneur through and through, like how amazing. So I just thought like that was really interesting in terms of thinking.
I always like people as well that kind of move between industries. So he's gone from like fashion to food.
I think it's really clever.
And just show someone's adaptability as well. Before we leave today, do you think, is there anything that you would have liked me to ask that we haven't had chance to cover yet?
I guess maybe like the future of personal branding, because I think social media is changing so quickly. And having used, especially LinkedIn as a platform for the last 5 years, it is very different today than it was 5 years ago. But I think like the thing that personal branding really is at its core is like the conscious and intentional effort to build your network and reputation. Like that's it. Whatever platform, wherever you're showing up, whatever you're doing, events in person and online, whatever it is, network and reputation are the things that it will always come back to. And I think people really underestimate the value of being intentional about those two things. So I think in terms of the future of personal branding, wherever it sits, I would always come back to the thinking around how do I build my network and reputation in a way that isn't just kind of leaving it to the world to decide, and that I can really own.
Yeah. When you look forward to planning your own sort of future around personal branding, do you spend much time thinking about risks and, you know, risks of platforms changing, of how AI is going to change the space? Or are you focusing more on what the elements you can control?
I think it would be silly to not think about the risks, which I do think about often. But I think at the same time, you can cancel out every thought in your own head if you start thinking about risks, which sometimes I do. And I think about a post and I think, well, this person could read it wrong, or this could be misinterpreted, or I shouldn't say this thing because what if it, and then I spiral and I'm like, okay, delete. So I think that I do think about the risk sometimes, but also at the same time, I just think like, whilst I enjoy it, whilst it's fun, whilst it's bringing opportunities, I'm just going to invest in it as much as I can.
Brilliant. Well, I think that is a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Claudia. It's been great talking to you today.
Thank you so much. I feel like that was a really interesting conversation. Hopefully for you
as
well.
Likewise. I loved chatting to you. Thank you for listening to Mad Influence. This is the part of the episode where podcasters tend to ask you to subscribe and most people don't bother, but I would really appreciate it if you could do, because it sends a signal to the platforms to say that the content is good, more people get to see it, and we get to grow the podcast and invite more guests on in the future. So if you could press follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to or watching this podcast, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.